So I get asked the question all the time, what's the best exercise to lose fat? Um, there isn't really an exercise to lose fat. The best way to exercise in order to reduce the fat that you carry is to build muscle mass. The muscle mass will then require enough energy to maintain this lower amount of fat. But your diet's going to be, diet hormones, are going to be, the hormones are at the end of the day going to be the number one thing that creates fat loss. When you eat food, when you eat macros, those macros correspond to hormones. Those hormones dictate what happens in your body. So that's what's going on. Now, when we start talking about, exercise and cardiovascular function, that type of thing, and people come in and they go, well, when I'm training, what's the best thing for fat loss? And I stop them and I go, okay, you're training, which means you're doing something for a specific reason. So for instance, if you went out and had somebody throw you 1,000 football passes and you caught 1,000 footballs, that'd be great training for catching footballs, but it would be terrible training for hitting baseballs with a baseball bat. So if you're in there and you're going to train, and you're like, oh, I'm going to do some cardio because cardio is the best way to lose fat. That's actually not accurate. But if you're like, okay, I'm going to do some cardio and I want best of both worlds. All right, well, what are your goals? So for instance, we have a lot of women who come in and, they want to look good and all these things. So I'm like, well, what is the goal of, like, how do you want to look? That's why let's always start with that. They're like, well, I want, a big round butt and big, beautiful thighs. Most women are belly button down centric and most guys are belly button up centric. And so I always tell them, like, look, if you want to do some stuff that's going to build your butt, build your legs, and then build your cardiovascular function so that you can, be active and go out and dance and hang out with your kids and walk up and down mountains and not get exhausted, then you want to do something that's going to build cardiovascular function and lower extremity size. And so the best option for that is, if it's in the gym, is going to be the old school Stairmaster, that big rotating stair. And okay, get your heart rate up, to a point where you can have a conversation, but it's very labored, where you have to kind of talk like this, like that type of a thing. Like that's going to be your upper function. Do that for a while. It'll help build cardiovascular function. It'll help build your butt. It'll help build your thighs and your legs and your calves and everything belly button down. You'll look fantastic. You'll have cardiovascular function, and it fits the training that you're trying to do, because your goal is to have that butt and the thighs and the thing and have some cardiovascular function. Now, if you then go home and have, 3 glasses of wine or 2 margaritas and, you have, American white pasta, what you just ate, the amount of sugar that's in that's going to release a giant amount of insulin, that's going to store all of that now sugar as fat, is going to be, detrimental to your goals. So what you do in the kitchen is substantially more important than what you do in the gym from a fat loss perspective. The old adage that the 6-pack is built in the kitchen is a very, very, very good thing to keep in mind. So the best way, if you're looking at, okay, my goal is to decrease the fat and increase the muscle mass so that I look the way I want and I have the energy and I have the health and everything I want. Great. So in that scenario, it would be, again, we're talking about the woman who's trying to, build up her butt and thighs and melt the fat off. Great. So first thing I would do is I'd be like, Stairmaster, that whole thing. But then it's, where are your hormones at? Where's your testosterone levels at? Where's your fasting insulin levels at? If you're hungry all day, okay, we've got ghrelin issues. We need to increase leptin function. These are great ways of using the GLP-1s or the GLP-3s to buffer that food noise so that we have those things regulated in. And if anybody was like, well, I don't want to use those, well, here's the problem. You are using the opposite chemicals of those when you eat processed foods, because all of the processed foods in this country have chemicals in them that induce you to eat more. So like, it's always funny because, the whole like Lay's potato chip thing, like can't just eat one. Like that's not a thing with organic strawberries. That's not a thing with steak. It's not like you eat steak and you're like, oh, I am full now. And then 10 minutes later, you're like, well, if I walked by the steak and there was still a bite left, I'd still like pick at it. Or, because like if you look at, any of the candies, even the processed like keto stuff that people are like, oh, it's better because I'm eating the keto stuff. It is better. But the problem is if you eat 2 or 3 and you walk away, like you're 20 feet away or whatever, and you're sitting down, and it motivates you enough to I want another one, to get up and walk back in and eat one, not because you're hungry, but because your mouth wants one. That's what you're fighting against. So when we talk about food noise, we talk about how GLP-1s and GLP-3s help with that. That's a big thing that you might want to do to combat the toxic little addiction chemicals that are being put in there specifically to make you addicted to these things and get you to eat more. So you're battling a giant industry that is their entire goal is to have you eat just one more thing. So that's one of those things. So if you're looking at this and you're like, hey, look, I'm exercising and I'm trying to eat right, but these things aren't working, you need to break it down to a hormonal function. When we talk about the standard American diet and all these, we talk about the food pyramid and all the carbohydrates people were eating. And then we're like, if you'll just eat meat, you'll have a lot less fat. Well, okay. What that does is, again, when you eat those things, there's a difference in hormonal function. So, because again, remember, if we're going to like the calories stupidity, carbohydrates are 4, protein's 4. So if you swapped, same calorie count, if you swapped carbohydrates for protein and you lost weight, obviously, which is what these high protein diets are, which is what a lot of the keto stuff is, obviously the calories thing isn't real. So what you've got to look at is like, what are the hormones that are being produced? Carbohydrates turn into glucose. Glucose produces insulin response. Proteins turn into amino acids, and that produces a glucagon response. The G from GLP-1 and GLP-3 is glucagon. It's glucagon-like peptide. Glucagon is the hormone that tells your body to use fat as a fuel source and to process through. So that's what we have to kind of focus on, is when you're actually focusing on your diet, it's really where are your hormones at? So, one of the things that I love, so I've got, and this is going to be, it's my happy place when I get diabetics, type 2 diabetics in. Like I had one yesterday. We pulled her blood in August. Her sugars were 320. Her A1C was 11.9. We pulled them 2 weeks ago, got the results back. We talked to her yesterday. Her blood sugar, instead of being 320, was 140, and her A1C was 6.1. So it went from 11.9 to 6.1. We basically cut it in half by using peptides, by using hormones to reset and re-regulate the system. So if you're trying really hard to find the best exercise to lose fat, I would focus on finding the best exercises to build the musculature that you want to have if the fat was gone. So if you're a woman and you want that nice big round butt and the big thighs, you don't want to be like, oh, you've heard people like, oh, they did this diet and they literally lost their ass because it all went away. Well, if you don't want to do that, you need to build that up with musculature. And again, anytime you're on a GLP-1, GLP-3, or you're doing these dietary things, you've got to make sure that your testosterone levels and your growth hormone levels are at a higher level, because your body will eat your muscle tissue in order to fulfill mineral supplies, cofactor supplies, amino acid supplies, sugar supplies. It will eat your muscle tissue. So if you have the testosterone, if you have the anabolics, the things that says nobody, don't eat these things, grow these things. Then when you go to the gym, you work out, you'll be able to rebuild and maintain that muscle mass in your butt and your thighs. Or if you're a guy, your chest and your shoulders and your arms, all those fun things. But the more muscle mass you create, the easier it's going to be to then lose the fat. So, that's also why body composition is much more important. This is also why when you're looking at your body goals, you need to take measurements. You need to not go by weight. You need to go by body composition. So, probably the cheapest at-home way is we use Hume pods. I think they're fantastic for a trend. I don't ever look at them and be like, oh, the Hume says you have 11.6% body fat, and that's accurate. I'm going to go with it's not. But DEXAs aren't super accurate either. So what you want to do is like, where's the trend? If the visceral fat's trending down and the adipose tissue is trending down and the muscle mass is trending up and your weight's staying the same, then what you can look at is you can be like, this is exactly what I wanted. I wanted more muscle. I wanted less fat. Those are the goals I'm hitting. Weight is kind of irrelevant in that whole thing. Now, what's going to end up happening is if you have a whole bunch of fat and you lose a whole bunch of fat and you gain some muscle, you're going to end up losing total weight. So I've gotten stronger. I've built a little bit more muscle mass, but I lost a little over 30 pounds between September 10th and middle of November. So, and that was which is funny because I was doing the 47-1, I'd eat once every 2 days. proteins, the whole deal. Everything was great. Full exercise, everything was great. Jumped on the peptides, lost all my visceral fat, lost the adipose tissue. All of most of my sleep apnea went away. So it is entirely a hormone game, and the foods you eat will dictate some hormonal function. But you're probably gonna have to get in there and play with these things to begin with. What's my favorite thing that I keep hearing people say is, well, this guy got ripped or this woman got ripped without using steroids, which is 100% a lie, because your body makes steroids. What you have to understand is, if your body's going to make steroids, if your body's going to make D3, if your body's going to make B vitamins, check the levels. If your levels of B vitamins aren't where they're supposed to be, take a supplemental B so that your levels are where they're supposed to be. It doesn't matter that you had to take it from the outside. It's where your levels are supposed to be. If your D3 is not high enough, take the D3. If your testosterone is not high enough, take the testosterone. The most important thing isn't that you didn't take the steroids or you didn't take the B vitamin. It's that, are your levels where they're supposed to be from a nutritional and hormonal standpoint? That is the entirety of this whole question. And the idea that you have to do it with, eating this particular way or doing this particular thing because this is what we've decided as society is the beneficial way is stupid. You're an individual. What works best for you? Have somebody help figure out what works best for you and then do that thing. In fact, that's how you have to do hormone therapy. So you get on some hormones and then people go, how do you feel? And you go, oh, I feel a whole lot better. Great. Then it's beneficial. If you're like, I don't feel any different, well, then there's something else that's being missed. So, that's one of those big things. If you don't look at your body as an individual, if you don't look at how did I feel before I made this change? How do I feel after I've made this change? What happened to me personally within this function? You're never going to get where you're supposed to go if you're trying to be like, well, Susan did this and this guy did this, and this whole group of people says that taking hormones is bad and cheating and horrible. Quit listening to all those people. What works for you? Have somebody figure out what works for you. You figure out what works for you, and then integrate that into a longer, more robust system. That's the only way you're going to get where you want to go. So that would be the thing I would tell you on exercise for fat loss. It is much, much, much more in the kitchen. It is entirely hormonally driven. And so figuring out how to get those things where they want to go is important, but nothing's going to build the muscle tissue if you don't go in the gym and work out. Nothing's going to build your cardiovascular function if you don't go and work out. If you don't do those things, those two things will never happen. You can drop all the fat you want to with peptides and diet and stuff like that, but you're never going to build the muscle unless you get in the gym and you work out. And I can guarantee you, you're not going to look the way you want to if you're just like, all right, we're going to reduce you down to 10% body fat. The vast majority of people, if you were able to just wave the wand and drop them 10% body fat, they would not be happy with the way they look because they don't have the muscle mass they think they do. So get in the gym, build that muscle mass up, but really, really, really monitor your hormones if you care about building muscle, losing fat, or being healthy or feeling good. That's where a lot of this is. So you guys have a fantastic day. If you guys have any questions, drop them in the comments. We'll chat. Thanks for your time.